I did want to spend some time asking just about how your sense of self has evolved and changed as you've gone through this process.
Yes, absolutely, because it certainly has and continues to evolve and expand as I also am continuing to try and explore, right? And do my own self-discovery and discovery of myself, discovery of relationships, what kinds of relationships, relationship structures. One thing we haven't spent much time talking about is monogamy, right? Or lack thereof.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Monogamy is supposed to be the default, and so many of us just assume that it will always be. And that's another one of those like bodily autonomy issues that we're allowed to play with.
Absolutely. And so like for me and my journey with that, I mean, that goes all the way back to even while I was still in the thick of deconverting, like still actively a pastor. And I had come to the point just in my assessment of the world around me, still fighting for my faith, still believing in a lot of ways. And yet, as I'm looking around at the world, I'm realizing, you know what? At least as far as I can fit together, not everyone would agree, sure, but as much as I can fit together, it seems as if, generally speaking, with humanity, now of course everyone's a little different, so we can't box anyone in. But generally speaking, it seemed to me that humanity, by and large, was not really built for monogamy. Led me to kind of see monogamy, or especially forced monogamy, right, as kind of bullshit, right? and so I had come to a point. So then that's even before I left the church or was divorced or anything. But so then, as I am exiting my marriage, I had essentially vowed to myself that I would never place myself in a forced monogamous relationship again. From the beginning, though, even as I'm kind of wrestling through my own, how are my ethics evolving and shifting and what's ethical now, what's not, as I'm leaving faith. Really from the beginning, though, I said, you know what, if I'm entering into this non-monogamous framework, and I didn't have all the terminology, still don't have all the term. Do we ever have all the term? Is there ever all of the terminology defined? But so I wasn't so familiar with ENM or ethical non-monogamy, but I knew, though, that how I practiced and explored with non-monogamy, it needed to be ethical.
Right, sure.
In other words, the freedoms I want, I have to lavishly acknowledge those freedoms to whoever my partner may be or whoever I'm seeing may be, right? Rather than this whole stereotypical cishet thing where he gets to do whatever he wants, but she can't. No, it needs to be free and open. And so really, for the 9 years since my divorce, I have never had a first date where on that first date, I expressed my views on monogamy and made sure to circle back on it later to make sure we're on the same page, because what I don't want is to start seeing someone and then, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm also seeing all these other people, or maybe now we are in what would typically be, you're my girlfriend or whatever may be. But I'm doing whatever I want to because, I did say once that I believe it's bullshit. So, and you're supposed to remember that, right? Even though we were laughing like it was a joke. So that's always been important to me.
Yeah. That's very much the opposite in a lot of ways of what we've been talking about in terms of that scarcity mindset, like your willingness to just sit down on that very first date and say, no, this is important for you to understand. And if you and I are not on the same page about this, hail fellow well met, like let's enjoy our drinks and that'll be the end of it. Yeah. What sorts of things helped you to find that confidence or that willingness to be empowered in that way?
I mean, really, I think, a lot of it is finding that freedom to discover, right? Finding that freedom to discover. As fucked up as a lot of the dating coaching stuff that I received was, a lot of it was good. It was about confidence building and being able to approach people in general, but also individuals you're interested in possibly dating or hanging out with or whatever may be, right?
And I haven't been shy in pointing out to the audience that while I love being a therapist, and there are many therapists that I love and admire, that there are plenty of garbage therapists polluting the profession. And so I feel like if I can say that, I can also point out that there really are some wonderful dating coaches and some that I've coordinated with and shared clients with. But to be mindful of that kind of like toxic pickup artistry type of mentality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, and there's been lots of things that I've kind of allowed myself the freedom to explore. I mean, I never really identified as thought of myself as polyamorous or identified with the poly community. And yet in my continuing to explore and things like that, actually just within the last year, for the first time out of those 9 years, found myself exploring poly, right? In a series, in a set of relationships, if you will. And finding a girlfriend who also had another girlfriend of her own. And yet living 420 miles away, right? And so then you're doing poly on top of it being a long distance relation. Crazy stuff, but allowing yourself the freedom to explore and discover. We could talk about kink and exploring kink and what does that look like, and allow yourself to explore. We could talk about this for another hour.
Yeah, no question. Are there any, I suppose last pieces of advice that you might want to offer for people who are going through this process? I mean, anything that helped to take the rocks out of your shoe or just stem some of the bleeding as you kind of rip out some of these pieces of yourself that no longer fit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, there's all kinds of things we could talk about. I think ultimately at the end of the day, final thoughts along that line is, allow yourself to explore, allow yourself to evolve, allow yourself, as you're experimenting with dating, post-faith, post-deconversion. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be said there. One kind of fun thing that I was told early on is like, so when you're on a first date and you're like, oh my, we're all so stressed out, right? Like, what do I say? Do I say the wrong thing? Do I not? Somebody said to me once, they said, listen, the first 15 minutes are a blur and nobody's going to remember it anyway. Because most likely they're so focused on what am I going to do to mess it up in the first 15 minutes? Listen, the first 15 minutes are a wash. Just get yourself settled in, have a drink, just relax, whatever, or not drink, cup of coffee, whatever you're doing. Just allow yourself, take some deep breaths and relax. And then from there, kind of the 3-point thing that somebody gave to me, and I thought this was helpful, is listen, try and be playful, relax, just have fun, build rapport, just try and look for that connection and look for chemistry. Is there chemistry there? But try not to, don't worry about trying to manufacture some facade. Maybe don't rush into this, rapid fire interview of them where they feel like they're being interrogated. Nobody wants to be interrogated, right? Just try and have fun, make it playful while also keeping yourself safe, right? So those are some thoughts along that line. But biggest thing overall, try not to fear who you are. Try not to fear your own sexuality. You're beautiful. You are fucking amazing. How do I know? Because you're human, and humans are mind-blowing, amazing, and
that's
sexy
enough.
And fucking fantastic, right? Absolutely. And that's enough. That's all you need. Yes.
Sure. Any books or other resources that you might recommend to folks?
Yeah. I mean, there's a variety of things that we could talk about, right? So I mean, depending on where you are in the journey, if you're fresh coming out of your deconversion, something as foundational as Daryl Ray's book, Sex and God, can be super helpful there. If you're thinking about exploring things like, non-monogamy and polyamory and things like that, you have, the Ethical Slut can be, which I like to affectionately refer to as the Poly Bible. You've got, from a deconversion lens, lots of great things to look at. One thing a book that I find myself recommending a ton is Greta Christina's Coming Out Atheist, which can be super helpful in just some good practical things and coming out atheist and what does that look like. And, I've written a little bit on some of those things as well that might be helpful, but those are a few things. Yeah.
No, please tell us a little bit more about your own work on these issues and where people can learn more about you on the web.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, my day job now is in finance. So boring, not what we care to discuss, but my heart what my heart really lies in is in helping people more fully, first of all, just discover and then more fully live out their values, whether we call it humanism, or we have a different set, or we name different set of names or terms or whatever, but really discovering their values and then more fully living it out, embodying those values, especially in the context of community. And these are common themes, living out your values, that I talk about regularly in various places, various contexts. One of those would be at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis, where I serve on the board and teach sometimes. Also, too, I'm going to be speaking later this month at the American Humanist Association at their conference here, their annual conference, and going to be talking about that very thing, upgrading our humanism, building a lifestyle of embodied values. So that's something I find really especially important. In terms of sexuality and the kinds of things we're specifically talking about tonight, well, in my long list of one-day books I may write for an upcoming book, this is actually I would love to one day write a book on this. As far as websites and things like that, due to my job in finance, federal regulation requires that I not have my website anymore. So unfortunately, I had to take down my blogs on my website. So those no longer exist. But you can certainly connect with me on Instagram, connect with me on Twitter, whatever you'd like there. And I think, it was flashed in front of us there for a moment. But check that all out. I've written a couple books. The main one is, which was up for a moment there, is The Rise and Fall of Faith, a God to Godless story for Christians and atheists, which really the point of that, it does center on my own deconversion story and gets deep in the weeds on that. But really the point of the book is to foster a greater dialogue between those of faith and those without, building bridges rather than walls. And it's built to have tools in there to help foster that discussion between those of faith and those without. The Audible does not have all of those tools in it, unfortunately. It more just tells the story. But if you get the paperback, the hard copy, it'll have those in it. And actually, a little bit of a fun fact, some folks have told me how, I don't know if we remember from our old days of, back in church world and whatnot, how, maybe in some churches your pastor would hold up a copy of like these little books, whatever, to give out to everybody as an Easter gift, an evangelism tool. Right. Yeah. And even like things like by like John Ortberg and what's the one where it's the Case for Christ.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
In certain traditions, like these little mini books on the Case for Christ, and hand these out. You can buy little mini versions of them for like $3, hand them out to all your friends for Christmas and generate conversation. So I've had people tell me that they took a twist on my book and actually handed it out to all of their believing Christian friends and say, let's read this together. Let's go through it. Let's go through the dialogue and the tools and just have conversation. So you can use it as like a reverse evangelism tool. Anyway, so those are some thoughts there for you.